guys, thank you so much for joining me in another video. So as you can tell based on the title, today we are talking about the brand BETTTER, and I also kind of want to talk about Julie Pelipas, the founder, and her personal style, aesthetics, philosophy, what is sort of behind her brand. And I was recently thinking about her style. I just did a video where I was talking about the Rose latest collection, the spring 2024 collection. Within that I was talking about normcore and its proximity to this dadcore and just overall more sportcore kind of aesthetics. Baroque core was something that came up as I was talking about this collection from the row and how it had sort of these subtle nods towards this look. I feel Julie Pelipas's brand BETTTER is sort of in like a very similar aesthetic or style universe as this recent collection, but I think it's a little bit more obvious, and I think the sports infused looks are a little bit more prevalent in a lot of her works. The brand BETTTER, it's more than just minimalist or normcore or dadcore. At its surface level, it feels very Fran Lebowitz meets Sporty Spice, but there's also this dynamic of femininity, this commentary on modern life. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Julie Pelipas, her aesthetic, her ideology, and how it's infused in her fashion. And just a little bit about Julie Pelipas and the early beginnings of the brand. Julie Pelipas was a former fashion director at Vogue Ukraine. She also worked at Harper's Bazaar, and the brand BETTTER was launched early 2020. And this was during the early stages of the pandemic. The thing about Julie Pelipas was she was someone that had a very strong online presence. Often her original designs she created for the brand were actually confused with old Phoebe Philo Celine era creations. And if you followed her style a few years ago, you would see her rocking old Celine. You see her rocking the Row, Jill Sander, brands in this sort of aesthetic universe. When she started her brand, she started to produce small capsule collections that sold out very quickly. And while many brands were struggling during the pandemic, it actually worked out quite well because she had a very strong online presence and following. And in 2022, she built a production facility in Kiev, Ukraine. But then, as we all know, recently Russia has invaded Ukraine. Since then, she's had to relaunch her production. BETTTER now runs its production in Portugal as well as its research and design in London. She's very hopeful that she can bring her brand back to Ukraine. So that's just a little bit about the early beginnings of this brand. Now let's talk about the clothing. Let's talk about the aesthetic inspirations. And what's very interesting about her is she's created whole collections using dead stock clothing. There's obviously this mission of sustainability, but also transparency. So this is a quote from Denizen, and I'll include all of my references and links in the description box below. But she stated this: "I wanted to talk about sustainability in a really honest way without all of the greenwashing. When I would travel for fashion weeks and go to the trunk shows and the showrooms, I would see so many clothes and how similar they all were and the amount of dead stock that was left behind. So I started thinking about how we could stop producing so much while still creating beautiful clothes with that timeless quality that our parents' generation had. That was where my idea for an upcycling system began. It was in my head for 3 years before I decided to quit Vogue and do my own thing. 100% of our products are upcycled, and we are fully transparent about every step in the process, from where we source fabrics to exactly how a piece was produced. Because beyond the clothes, we want to communicate our vision to our clients." And so you see how vintage men's suits are reworked for women, this transformation of these clothes and giving them a new lease of life. But along with this also has its own limitations. Rather than like starting something from start, you have to work with pre-existing fabrics. The designs are typically limited to these small capsule collections. So she has to create these small batches. And so there is that sort of limitation. Whereas if I want a Louis Vuitton canvas piece, like I can always pretty much like expect, well, I don't really know anymore. But with these collections, it's sort of limited to the dead stock. But I think it also creates a specialness in a way. It's not something everyone is gonna have. And of course, this idea of upcycling isn't new. There are so many brands doing this. The second point I wanna talk about is this concept called tailoring algorithms.
SDA number 212. Backside button-down blazer with readjustable strap. You can wear this blazer standard and oversized fit.
So I'm going to read a quote from the Business of Fashion because I'm not going to explain this properly. Better is powered by a series of tailoring algorithms designed to take the complexity out of reconstruction. It took years to develop, taking apart suits seam by seam, using digital design and fit software to map virtual patterns and required adjustments. Now that data forms a continuously improving digital backbone that allows the company to quickly calculate how to adjust men's suits to fit women's bodies without losing their original shape and proportions. We try to replicate the design process in the most efficient and most precise way so that in the end you have the perfect product in production that will take you no more than a few hours, explained Pelipas. I feel like this is something that would be really cool to see like the process of. I think that would be super fascinating. And the next point I want to talk about, it's very obvious in her clothing. And I think there's just this fusion of feminine masculinity. It's almost like appropriating masculine clothing for women, which totally makes sense because she's taking dead stock fabrics, typically from like a lot of menswear companies. It really does feel like appropriated menswear. And while this is nothing new, this, idea of women trying to make clothing more masculine, I think it's done in a very contemporary context with like the use of technology. Julie Pelipas herself has a very inspiring story as a Ukrainian woman. I think the perseverance of this brand, and I'll talk a little bit about it later, there is just this like feeling of like a strong, persevering woman, a very resilient woman. While she talks about how much she's lost, there's this strong will to persevere and to pursue what she loves despite her world falling apart. Now, one thing I want to talk about is color palette choices and how the sort of juxtaposition of color is used in her clothing. Of course, we're naturally going to see some of the typical neutrals we'd see in very traditional like menswear fabrics. When you think of a brand like Xenia, like the kind of color palettes that you'd see in like men's suits, like very professional. Think lots of neutrals, navies, khakis, camels, colors like that. But then it's also fused with this sporty undertone. If I'm gonna be honest, when I saw this like concept of sport core, bloke core, and I initially didn't really like make me excited, if I'm gonna be honest. But then when I see her pull off these looks, it's very much that kind of same energy of off-duty Princess Diana, but for today. Against these like neutral colors, we're seeing these sort of saturated colors that you'd see in like sports jerseys. Bright reds, yellows, blues, against kind of like sports fabrics and materials. Very vivid optic whites. It kind of makes me think of kind of the messaging around a lot of these kinds of sports brands. When I just think of the optimism in like a Nike or, I don't know, like I'm not a sporty person, but do you know what I mean? Just kind of this like perseverance, this attitude of perseverance. That's what these colors remind me of. But then when it's like juxtaposed with like a blazer and like a tailored suit, it's kind of giving me OG Donna Karan. And then the final point I want to talk about is this idea of subverting business casual attire. Think of Patrick Bateman, think of like American Psycho, that kind of cutthroat corporate undertone.
This is Abigail. If you're hearing this message, that means I've finally taken a damn break. I'm out of the office until I'm good and ready. If you can't think for yourself on this one, you'll have to wait until I get back. I've been busting my ass day in and day out, and I deserve this time off. I don't bother people while they're on vacation. Be like me. If you miss me, it's time to give me a raise.
When I think of her recent drop, the Out of Office collection, it's kind of like this fusion of these women on the beach in their business attire, but they're amongst casual people, and how like glaring they look and out of place they look, to even like the 5 p.m. suit collection. And what she's doing is she's taking these very wearable pieces, but like subverting them, deconstructing them, making the silhouettes a little bit more asymmetric, but then they're also sporty at the same time. What I think is so fascinating about her is she's used her position as a former Vogue editor to really bring attention to what's been going on in Ukraine. She founded what's called BETTTER.community. It's an online platform dedicated to bringing awareness to Ukrainian designers. She was known for helping set up teams at Harper's Bazaar and Vogue in Ukraine. She's always been an advocate for the creatives in her own country and giving them a platform to publish their work. And Julie was recently recognized at the Fashion Awards as one of the industry leaders of change. And she recently was a winner of the LVMH Karl Lagerfeld Special Jury Prize. And this is really beneficial because she not only receives a grant, but she's also given a year-long mentorship program via the LVMH group. So I think will help expand her brand. She's definitely a designer I want to continue to follow. If you're looking for like style inspiration, I suggest looking her style up. But I think what I love about her is how her style really conveys how she's a very like strong and persevering and resilient woman, and you see that in her fashion. I think if you like Celine, I think if you like the Row, you'll like this, but it's got a bit of a sporty edge, which I think is quite cool. So yes, anyways, that's my video. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to know, was there anything about her work that really stood out to you? Would love to know in the comments, and thank you so much for joining me in another one, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.